Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this interview with Central Asia Metals CEO Nigel Robinson. Central Asia Metals is listed on AIM with the ticker CAML and a market cap of £340 million. It has two operations, the Kounrad copper operation in Kazakhstan and the Sasa zinc and lead mine in North Macedonia. We will now begin the interview. The first question is, Nigel, can you provide an overview of the company and its strategic objectives?
Yeah, firstly, good morning. Our strategic objectives are primarily to produce base metals profitably in a sustainable manner and safe manner for the metals that are essential for modern day living. We have two operations, as you mentioned, producing copper in Kazakhstan at an operation called Kounrad, and also zinc and lead at an operation in North Macedonia. We listed on the London Stock Exchange in September 2010, and we've been operating Kounrad since 2012, and we purchased the Sasa mine in 2017.
How does the company's business model aim to generate value for shareholders?
Our value model is primarily based on the dividends that we pay back to our shareholders, and we've been paying dividends since December 2012. We've now paid back nearly $300 million back to our shareholders since that time. And we have a dividend policy which is 30 to 50% of our free cash flow from those two operations, Kounrad and Sasa, that we pay back to our shareholders every year.
Please, could you give us an overview of your operations?
Yeah, the two operations we have, Kounrad, first of all, that's an in situ dump leach with producing between 13,000 to 14,000 tons of pure cathode copper. It's in Kazakhstan, just north of a town called Balkhash, near Lake Balkhash. And we've been managing and operating this mine since 2010 when we acquired it from the state. We went into production the 30th of April 2012. And since that time, we've produced nearly 145,000 tons of copper at very low costs. The reason it's low cost is because it's in situ dump leaching. We don't have many moving parts and we don't move any of the ore. We just irrigate it and leach it and send it through an SXEW plant to produce, as I say, around about 13 to 14,000 tons of copper cathode. The second operation is in North Macedonia. That's the Sasa mine. This is a more traditional underground lead and zinc mine, whereby we crush it and put it through a flotation plant, and that produces zinc and lead in a concentrate form, around about 19 to 21,000 tons of zinc in concentrate, and 27 to 29,000 tons of lead in concentrate is our guidance this year for that. Again, another low-cost operation, and we acquired it, as I say, in late November 2017.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Please, could you provide us with an overview of the company's recent H1 operational update?
We've literally just put out results last Tuesday, I think it was, for a production update. We haven't yet done the final numbers for the financials for the first half of the year, but production was on track with nearly 6,700 tons of copper produced in the first half of the year at Kounrad, around about 9,700 tons of zinc, and 13,700 tons of lead in concentrate at Sasa. So on track for our guidance this year. We had a good first half in terms of safety. We only, unfortunately, one is too many, but we had one, what we call an LTI, which is a lost time incident for safety related reasons. And overall, we're on track, as I say, for our full year guidance. We will be announcing our half year results, our interim results, as we call them, in September, which will provide information on the actual financial performance in that first half of the year.
That's fantastic. Thank you. What are some of the ESG initiatives Central Asia Metals has implemented across the business?
Well, as I said earlier, I think this is something we take extremely seriously in terms of our focus on sustainability, and how we view that is how we look after the environment, how we look after the local community, and also the government aspects. If I look at environment, first of all, we've gone through a life of mine plan in terms of a review of the procedures on site at Sasa since we acquired it in 2017. And by doing so, we're now implementing transition of the mining method from sublevel caving to paste fill mining. And what that entails is it will be a far more environmentally friendly way of managing the waste from the mine, the tailings product as it's called, whereby we intend over the next few years, 70% of that waste will be managed in a more environmentally friendly manner with dry stack tailings and also paste backfill, which means that you put the waste from the mining back into the ore body itself. So that's something we're proud of. And also in terms of management of water on site, we've made a commitment to reduce the consumption of water from local water sources by 75% by 2026. And I think finally, on environmental matters, one thing we have committed to is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2030. And then primarily doing that by signing a renewable electricity contract in North Macedonia. And also we're in the process at the moment of building a solar farm in Kunrad, which we'll maybe talk about later also. In terms of social contributions to the local community, we have a strong track record here. Certainly at Kunrad, we've had a foundation, a separate legal entity, where we put a percentage of our revenue into that legal entity for worthwhile causes in the local area. We've been doing this since 2010, and recently we've increased that percentage to 0.5% of our revenue, both at Kunrad and SASA. The SASA Foundation is obviously slightly newer, but we're following the same approach effectively in terms of projects for the local community. In terms of reporting on sustainability, we've just put out our 4th sustainability report, which is to GRI standards. That is something we're particularly proud of.
That's brilliant, thank you. Tell us more about the solar plant project at Kunrad.
Yes, so funnily enough, I was on site last week, actually. It's a fairly small solar farm by international standards, but for the use of electricity in Kunrad, clearly a lot of it in Kazakhstan at the moment is fossil fueled. They have, as a country, a target whereby they'll increase, I think by 2030, the amount of renewable energy in the country from a current level of around 3% to 15%. So one of the contributions we felt we could do as a company is generate some of our own electricity requirements through the solar farm. It's capacity of 4.77 megawatts. It's going to cost us around about $4 to $4.5 million. We're progressing the project well on site at the moment, and it will go into commissioning phase in Q4 of this year. And it will provide around about 16 to 18% of our electrical requirements on site. And it will contribute around about a 6 to 7% reduction in group greenhouse gas emissions, which is something which is a contribution adding to the renewable electricity contract we've got at SASA, which is 100% of renewable energy for the SASA electrical requirements.
Thank you. What investments has the company made at the SASA project since its acquisition?
Well, we acquired the SASA underground mine in late 2017 for $402.5 million. And I think since that time, we've made a significant commitment to the workforce in terms of improving the canteen facilities, the bus facilities, investing in more mobile equipment for the plant. And that was all done in the early days. I think I mentioned before that we did a technical review and made this fairly critical strategic decision to move from sub-level caving mining to a paste-fill mining method. Now, that involves a number of moving parts. One is to build what we call a backfill plant, and that's costing, with all the relevant pipe work that goes into the underground mine, around about $15 million. And we're coming to the end of that aspect of the project, with commissioning currently going on as we speak. We committed to building a new decline, which will access the ore body. It's a far wider tunnel, which will make access easier, improve the ventilation. We managed to hold through on that, which basically means we started at the surface and we started at what's known as 910 level. The tunnel effectively connected through from the surface through to the underground level on May the 27th of this year. And we're now continuing that decline further down into the lower levels of the ore body. That's a significant investment to improve the accessibility of the ore body, as I say, and potentially in the future allow us to use electric vehicles to get down to the ore body and improve our green footprint. So that's another key part of this investment in the SASA mine. And the last part of the investment really is, as I mentioned before, moving to what's known as dry stack tailings, which involves basically a dry stack tailings filtration plant, and also the landform whereby you manage what they call filter cake, which is the tailings which have had moisture squeezed out of it. So quite a significant investment across all of those aspects of the project. We're well on track to complete most aspects of it by Q1 2024 next year. And this will take the life of mine out to 2039 and make it a significant improvements in terms of the technologies we use on site.
Thank you. What relationship does the company have with local governments and communities at SASA and Kunrad?
Yeah, I think this is fundamental to any mining company, to be honest with you, Joe. If you don't cover off that angle, then you don't get the support locally. I think we've got two different operations, as I said before. In Kazakhstan, first of all, we have an operation that employs around about 330 people, all of whom are local. I must first say that, because that's something we're particularly proud of. We don't have a lot of what you call expats operating the mine. It's 100% local staff that we've trained up and that we use on that site in Kounrad. And our relationships with the local community are more through the Kounrad Foundation. Balkhash town itself, close to the operation, is a town of around about 60 to 65,000 people. So we're less influential in terms of the local community, the wider community, should I say, and also in terms of the local government or the national government in Kazakhstan. We don't have that many day-to-day dealings as we've been operating there now quite successfully for over 11 years. I think the situation in Sasa is very different, whereby we have a town of around about 6,000 people just down the valley at Kamenetsa, and we employ in the area around about 750 people. So again, very close community ties. And also we're one of the biggest industries in North Macedonia. It's a country of a population of around about 2.2 million people, and Sasa is one of its biggest industries. So we have a far closer relationship with the national government in North Macedonia, as a question of having, initially acquired the mine from the sellers in 2017 and establishing ourselves in the country as a reputable and robust mining operator. So slightly different in both countries, but I think in both countries we work very well with the local community, and we work hard to establish good relationships locally, as well as keeping compliance with all the national requirements, therefore keeping ourselves clean with the national government.
How is the company going to achieve its GHG targets?
Well, just to reiterate, our target is to reduce our GHG emissions by 50% by 2030. Last year, we reported a 40% reduction, primarily given the fact that we had a full year's contribution from a renewable energy contract that we have within North Macedonia. So we have 100% renewable energy that we use at the site there. I've mentioned the Kounrad solar farm. That's going to contribute 6 to 7% once it comes on stream, and it's due for commissioning in Q4 of this year. So that's going to contribute another, as I say, 6 to 7%. And then the other 5% effectively will be through various project initiatives we have on site, both at Sasa and at Kounrad. An example of that might be the installation of temperature sensors at Kounrad, whereby we monitor the temperature of the solution we're putting on the dumps. And as we can reduce that temperature, we'll reduce the amount of coal that we actually consume on site at Kounrad. The move maybe to electric vehicles in the future, but these are all things that we're working on, which I think will provide that extra 5 to 6% we'll need to get to that 50% target.
As one of the leading dividend-paying mining companies on AIM, what is the dividend policy, and how much have you paid back to shareholders?
Yeah, I've probably preempted this question, haven't I, by answering some of those questions, I guess. But we have paid, as I say, since we started paying dividends in December 2012, we've now paid back nearly $300 million to our shareholders. We've got a pretty robust policy. I think it's well respected in the markets, whereby of our free cash flow, that's all the cash that's generated both at the Kounrad operation and the Sasa operation, less any money we set aside for what we call sustaining capital. The remaining figure, and last year in our reported results, that was nearly $90 million. We pay back 30 to 50% of that. And last year, that number was approaching the 50% level, given that we paid down all the debt that we took on board in 2017 to acquire the Sasa mine. So we now run a business that has no debt, is paying good dividends. And as I say, we view the dividend policy very closely in terms of it's something we know adds value to our shareholders. It's something we've got a very good track record on paying back. It's very reliable, but we don't look at it in terms of a yield. We look at it in terms of the available cash flow to pay back. And effectively, when you think about it, that will leave another 50% of the free cash flows, now that we've paid all the debt down, for growth opportunities and for actually investing back into the business.
Thank you. What is the company's business development strategy?
This is a challenging question, Joe. I don't mind admitting. Growing a mining business is difficult. One of the things which is fundamental to us is making sure that anything we do acquire is accretive to our shareholders, so they have an improvement in their dividends or the cash flow or the EBITDA on a per share basis. So that's fundamental. And also maintaining that dividend, which has been unique to the company, certainly since 2012. So maintaining the dividend and being any opportunity being accretive. Now, where we look for those opportunities, it is globally, but we have tried to refine that down to European time zones. Kazakhstan, we're comfortable in operating in Kazakhstan, and we'll look at some of the African countries in that which operate clearly in the European time zone. So jurisdictionally, that's where we're focusing our efforts at the moment. I said before that our strategic mission effectively is to produce the base metals, copper, zinc and lead. We'll look further in other base metals to see if there's any opportunities there. So that's the metal side of it. And in terms of the development spectrum, we look at anything from, at the moment, early stage exploration through to development and even assets that are into production. So it's a challenge trying to find the next opportunity that's as profitable as Sasa and Kounrad, but we continue to look for those opportunities. We recognize that we do need to grow the business because our assets are finite.
What's the company's criteria for M&A? Would you look outside of the current base metals portfolio and operating jurisdictions?
I have partly answered that. That's why I say it's very difficult, actually. Because it's mining and you have to go where the geology tells you or the geography tells you. It's not like we can open another branch in Newcastle of what we currently do, because we have a very good product. We know what we produce. We like the metals we're involved in. And we need to look for opportunities wherever the geology tells us those opportunities are. So we do look, quite a broad geographical remit, but certainly we need to provide some focus such that our shareholders know that we won't stray too far outside the envelope of copper, zinc and lead. But there are far other base metals that we would look at, even some of what they call the future facing metals, the metals that are used in batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel. We'll look at some of those opportunities if they arise, but we have to make sure that what we do look for in the future is something that we can manage and something that we have the skill set to actually develop or continue into production. So it's not an easy task looking for the next opportunity, but it's something we put a lot of effort into and a lot of focus into.
What is the company's strategy to fund any future M&A activity?
Yeah, I think the strategy for funding has become easier since we paid all the debt off. So if we take ourselves back to acquiring the Sasa mine, that was $402.5 million. And when we acquired it, obviously we looked at all the valuation models and we agreed a price ultimately on what we were going to pay. How we funded it was a mixture of equity and debt. So in round terms, it was $200 million of debt and $200 million of equity. It wasn't quite that, but in terms of looking forward and how we could afford to modify the dividend policy, maintain a good dividend, and also make sure that the debt we took on board was manageable. We're quite a prudent bunch in many ways, so we don't like to overstretch ourselves on the debt we took off. And as I say, last August, 5 years into the ownership of Sasa, we fully paid down that debt. So looking at new opportunities now moving forward, some model similar to that, or maybe a different mix from 50-50 debt equity is what we'd look to. So we're confident with the relationships we have with banks that they would assist us, they would fund us, and given a fairly depressed share price at the moment, we would look to acquire something more from debt, really, because we don't have any debt on the books at the moment. So I think that's what we're looking at. We know what levels of debt we can afford, and obviously a lot of it depends on what you're actually acquiring, because you have to look forward on the cash flows of the acquisition opportunity. But certainly we have good relationships and we know that we can fund the debt portion of it. The equity portion is a bit more different, because we have to make sure that we keep, as I said before, the word accretion for our shareholders, to make sure that the dividend we're going to be paying out in the future will be as attractive to them as it currently is. But that in itself provides a challenge, given the current markets and metal prices. So it's always a balance. We're confident we've got two very good assets at the moment that are cash flowing, that provide very strong positive cash flows. We are building up cash in treasury because we don't have any debt to pay off. Last year, or in the years when we were paying the debt down, about $38 million every year went out in capital interest payments. We don't have that at all now. So that's building up in the treasury to give us a bit more cash in the bank balances that we hold as well, which will help assist us with the acquisition of opportunities.
Thank you for the detail. Operations are going well for Central Asia Metals, but your share price appears to have underperformed recently. How would you explain this?
How do I explain that? I mean, we're doing everything that we said we'd do. So we're delivering on our targets. I mentioned before the production guidance this year for 13,000 to 14,000 tons of copper, which we're on track to deliver. 19,000 to 21,000 tons, should I say, of zinc, which we're on track to deliver, and 27,000 to 29,000 tons of lead, again, which we're on track to deliver. So everything we can do and maintaining our cost base and our capital cost is what I'm focused on as the CEO here. Unfortunately, we are in a market at the moment whereby it's pretty tough there for the small cap companies. There's tough macroeconomic conditions, both in terms of metal prices and just the interest rate scenarios that everybody's suffering from at the moment. So the actual macro, I believe, personally, is affecting our performance in terms of shares. But we can only do what we can only control what we can control effectively. So as long as we keep delivering, metal prices, I do generally believe, will turn around, because at the moment, there's a lack of investment into some of those metals, which have all got demand curves that are increasing as we go into future years, particularly copper, with the electrification and the move towards a green transition in the economy. So I do believe the metal prices will turn around. That will help our share price, but they are tough conditions at the moment. And clearly, with bank base rates going from what effectively a year ago was maybe 1% to maybe closer to 5 or 6% now, the whole risk profile of investing in mining companies, equity companies, against what you can get on government bonds, the whole scenario has changed. And I do believe that possibly is having a slightly negative effect. But as I say, as long as we deliver on what we say we'll deliver on, confident, that the shareholder returns will be there. And I'm confident also that the share price will return, given the very strong track record we've got in paying dividends back to our shareholders.
Thank you. And what is your vision for the company in the short term and the longer term?
My vision for the company in the short term, it's very, very clear, I think, to me. What we need to do is deliver on our production guidance for this year, deliver on our safety targets for this year, deliver on our Kunrad solar farm for this year, and also specifically at Sasa, make sure that we deliver on time and on budget the transition projects that I mentioned before as we move to paste backfill and dry stack tailings. And we are on track to deliver on those things. In the longer term, clearly, M&A, acquisitions, growth is what we're looking to do, to actually grow the company from the current market cap you mentioned right at the beginning of the interview, around about 340, 350 million pounds on any one given day, to the next level where we could potentially get into the FTSE 100 and actually get into the main market of the London Stock Exchange. That requires us, we believe internally, to get to a far higher market cap, which is only going to be delivered effectively by growing the business. And that's what we spend a lot of time on, trying to grow this business to the next level. So those are my visions in terms of growth, in terms of local challenges, or short-term challenges, should I say, but also as a company, make sure that we're well respected for our sustainability initiatives. I think we have got a good track record on that, and I think we've done very well in that regard. So that's something that we focus on strongly, and that's something that we'll continue to put a lot of focus and effort on.
And as we end this interview, what key points should current and potential shareholders take away?
I think the key point for us really is that we are a low-cost operation. So through the vagaries of metal prices changing, going up and down as clearly they do, we're well protected in that regard. We have a strong track record in terms of paying dividend back, as I've mentioned several times, I think, on this interview. We have a strong management team. We've got a good track record in terms of our ability to deliver on what we say we'll deliver on. We have a strong board. And I think if people are looking to invest in the future, they need to look at the base metals that we're involved in. There is a good future for these base metals. And at the moment, with the lack of investment and the current economic circumstances we find ourselves, that I think can only lead to strong metal prices in the future. We're going through a cost of living crisis. That increasing cost base that everybody's facing will ultimately, I think, feed through into stronger metal prices to deliver on the things that the world needs for the essential metals that we need for our lifestyles.
Thank you everyone for your participation, and thank you, Nigel.